Here we go. All right, we are back here at the podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Pat Flynn, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I have Ray Lloyd joining me, and for all you professional wrestling fans out there, you're going to know who this is. This is Glacier. And, Ray, you know nothing about me. This is the first time that we've had this conversation. But I'm 32, just to give my age. This will put some historical perspective. I first started watching wrestling as a young kid. I think like right when you kind of came on the WCW scene, right?
Yeah,
Glacier was kind of like part of my early childhood, right?
Oh, well, good. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, grew up watching your matches, and I would stay up. I remember me and the neighborhood kids, right? We would stay up. We'd try and watch Nitro every night, and then we'd meet at the bus stop in the morning and talk about the results. And so, like I've just got a whole bunch of nostalgia and fanfare of it. So it's really cool that you're here, and I'm excited to chat with you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same here. I'm really, really happy to be here. And it's funny. I just had lunch with Ernest and Cat Miller today, and we were just reminiscing about the fact that it's we can't believe it's really been 25 years. So it doesn't seem like it's been that long since we were out there running around in Monday Nitro era.
Right. Yeah.
Great time.
I can't believe it's been that long either. And it's funny because we have the, what's the service? Peacock? I think it's Peacock, right?
Yes,
and now that they have all the old wrestling, like Nitro and Raw, they have all of it, like the whole archive, which is crazy. And so, my wife and I will watch it sometimes for fun. So now she's super into it now. So we're back to watching 90s wrestling. We have nothing else because there's nothing good on TV that's new anymore, right? You got to go back.
And honestly, you're right. I mean, I can't seem to find much. And but no, I'm so thankful that that it's however it's landed, that there is a place where we can all go back and watch, because it's like Ernest and I were talking today, is that during that period for us, it was about it was 5+ years. I mean, I signed on in January of '96 and was pretty much there till the bitter end until we got bought out by WWE in April of 2001. And but it's funny, like because we were wrestling an average of over 200 shows a year, and back then it was all a blur. We were just it's funny how you talk about you were just trying to keep your spot, and so for me to be able to go back now and watch some matches that I haven't even, some I see that I had totally forgotten about.
Right.
And I watch it, I go, oh man, wow, yeah, what a great memory. So I'm really glad there's a place where I can go back and revisit, some of that stuff, and really all of it. And my significant other, who's I'm up in Atlanta now here at the Nightmare Factory, and I live full time in Orlando, and she never watched wrestling at all. So I'm having to kind of catch her up to speed on this other alter ego that I have as Glacier.
That's so funny. Okay, so I want to talk about just a lot of this stuff, but I mean, for people who because we have a number of people who watch this podcast, I'm not going to assume they're all professional wrestling fans,
Sure,
I am. How does somebody even get into this sport in the first place, right? So maybe give us a little bit of your origin story. What did you from a young age? Is this something you kind of always wanted to do, or is it something that you just kind of stumbled into? Super curious to hear that. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. I'll try to give the very abbreviated story, but I grew up. I've always been in athletics. Both my parents were very athletic, especially my dad, and I have a twin brother, and so we grew up in South Georgia in a small beachfront community called Brunswick, St. Simons Island, Georgia, and I love my hometown. I get back as much as I can, not as much as I'd like these days, but we grew up playing sports, and I gravitated naturally to football and martial arts, and started studying martial arts when I was about 14 years old, and then lucky for me, I was fortunate enough to go to college on a football scholarship. I went to Valdosta State University, who actually is playing for the Division II National Championship on Saturday. So
how about that?
Somewhere in Texas, I forget where they're playing the game, but anyway, and I was always a big wrestling fan. My brother and I always joked about, we would go to the Jacksonville Coliseum because championship wrestling from Florida was the big ticket back in the day for us. And we were lucky enough to where we lived in that right on the state line. So we got to watch Georgia professional wrestling and Florida professional wrestling, which were two hotbeds back in the 70s and 80s when we were coming up. Yeah. But so I was always into sports, always into athletics, and really as my football career was coming to an end at the college level, I was realistic enough to know I wasn't big enough to go to the next level, and I was okay with that. I rode that horse as far as I could, but then I got introduced to professional wrestling. And in Valdosta, there was a local TV station that actually filmed a local show there. And I got to know some of the guys, and, just as athletes will gravitate to athletes, and
Sure.
so, the old birds of a feather thing, and so I actually started talking to a couple guys that were in it, and they were like, hey, look, this is something we feel like you might be able to do if you want to do it. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And this is pre-internet days when wrestling was still a very protected business,
Sure.
and we've the general masses have known, for a long, long time that wrestling is a spectacle, so to speak, but it was still very protected. You were not the one, if you were in the business, you were not the one who was going to certainly admit that it wasn't, anything but on the up and up. And so, so when I came in, you really had to get invited in, and I was very fortunate to be in a position where the two gentlemen who really helped me, Rick Allen, I'm still very good friends with the two guys that helped me get in, and Fred Avery, who was the one who actually trained me. They believed in me, and I'm really, as I get older now, and I'm coaching a lot of the next generation, so to speak, of aspiring athletes. That's a big thing, that I was so fortunate to have great parents, who really believed in me and my brother, really encouraged us to do whatever it was that we were passionate about. And some of those things we crash landed when we did certain things we tried to do, but wrestling, I'm fortunate enough it stuck. And I got trained up. I actually trained with one of my best buddies from college. We played side by side in college, and then we trained together, got into wrestling. And after a few years, he decided it wasn't really the path he wanted. I moved to Atlanta, chasing my dream, and in 1996, it all came together, and I signed with World Championship Wrestling, which was a part of WTBS, which is on Turner Broadcasting System, and then it took off from there. And I was very thankful. I came along during a time when one of the greatest periods of professional wrestling ever, when it really was a period when there was a lot of everybody under the sun seemed to be watching wrestling. It was a time when there's only like really two big times in my lifetime when pro wrestling really, really made a lot of money. And there was an era in the 80s, basically during that Hulk Hogan era and the Andre the Giant era. And then in that Monday Nitro, Monday Night Raw ratings war era, which was kind of that mid to late 90s into 2000. So yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to be a victim of good timing, as I always say. But and I've kept, like I said, I've rode the wave of the wrestling business. Still to this day, I'm very active in it. I'm going on 35 years, and I've never taken a year off. Obviously the pandemic has affected everything and everybody, but yeah, I mean, I'm still very involved. I'm here as a coach with Dusty Rhodes, who's one of my mentors, who's an iconic professional wrestler. His sons, Dustin and Cody Rhodes, have both had amazing careers. I'm partners with QT Marshall and Cody Rhodes, and we're here. We have the school called the Nightmare Factory in Atlanta, Georgia. We actually are housed under the same roof with Chip Smith Performance Systems, and Chip is one of the top sports performance trainers and coaches in the world, in my opinion, and not just in my opinion. Anybody that knows sports training, he's always a godfather of sports performance. We are a part 23,000 square foot world-class training facility. And we have 4 rings, and we have several camps and classes that go. And I'm in between 2 classes right now, so we have time to break away to do this. But yeah. And so having mentors like Chip he was a great athlete, and he's trained, world-class athletes of every sport. And of course, he's done a lot with he knows Dallas DDP from DDP Yoga. I know you've had Dallas on, so yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have had a great career that's been kind of surrounded by athletics, mainly professional wrestling.
Yeah, that's so cool. Ray, let me start asking you some of the, I guess, the nerdy questions behind the scenes stuff. I mean, we talk, we talk. I mean, there's so much I want to know as somebody who's never been in this world, but kind of, grew up, especially when I was young, watching it and just finding it fascinating on so many levels. I mean, one is this sort of just fitness aspect of it. That'll be of interest to a number of people listening to this. I mean, you said you were doing 200 matches a year. I mean, that's insane, right? Because, right. I mean, most athletes have seasons, right? And the thing about wrestling is a lot of people think, well, yeah, it's a spectacle. It's kind of staged. It's fake, but that doesn't mean it doesn't really hurt, right? So I guess maybe like that's the first question. Give us an idea of the sort of maybe the physical toll that wrestling takes on your body. And maybe kind of like talk about behind the scenes of like, yeah, let's choreograph maybe this much, but at the same time, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're still getting put through a table. So it's like, that's not
It's
pain free, right? Give us an idea of some of that stuff if you don't mind.
It's funny. We have a saying in wrestling: you can't fake gravity. Falling down
That's
hurt.
good. That's good.
and I always tell you, because I'm 57, going on 58 here in May, and when I talk to middle-aged guys, and every now and then I'll run across someone who's kind of a critic of wrestling, and I always say to them, I say, and this seems to be the thing that opens their eyes, is I say to them, okay, if you're like you said, if you're 30 plus, any point past 30, as I always say, think of the last time you fell down. You just fell down. And how that hurt, because it does. I said,
it hurts.
Think about getting thrown down, thrown through, thrown over, thrown into things night after night after night. And I always have another saying that I always say is, just because I may know I'm going to get body slammed doesn't mean it's going to hurt any less.
Yeah.
So that's how but it is, it does. It was, it's funny. We have one of our 12-week camps that are just finishing up their final week this week, and I always, when we have the first few days of the group, I always tell them the same thing: is that this is a type of profession where it's not necessarily a contact sport; it's a collision sport. Like contact sports are like baseball and basketball, soccer. They're all contact sports. Football is a collision sport. They crash into each other. That's why they have that equipment they have. Wrestling, we crash into each other too. And pretty much about the most we have is a pair of knee pads, and trust me, when I tell people all the time, they go, "Oh, well, what about that ring? And, doesn't that ring have a big spring underneath it?" And let me just tell you, no, there is not. and I always say, if there is one, I haven't found it in my 35 years of wrestling. I'm still looking for that.
So let me ask you this real quick, because I asked this to DDP, and I'll be curious if you assigned the same number. I said, take a suplex off the top rope, right, or something like that. On a scale of 1 to 10 of like the impact or pain level, 10 being I'm landing on absolute concrete, 1 being I'm landing on a bunch of foam pads. Give us an idea, like where is it in that range with the ring?
I think, I was a little bit young. Dallas has been a big influence in my life. I always call Dallas like my crazy big brother. He's the guy who really went to bat for me to have the opportunity to come to WCW. But, and of course, I'm sure your listeners heard his story. I mean, I always say Dallas was, the world's, oldest rookie. He broke in at the wrestling around 35, 36 years old. I had been in wrestling almost 10 years when I signed my deal with WCW, and I was only 32. So I had started like 23, and it's right out of college. And I would say if I had to give it a number, honestly, just because I had youth on my side a little bit more than Dallas did during that era when we were going through it, it'd still be a solid 8.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where he put it. And that's bad enough one time. You're doing this 200 matches.
Yeah, and plus sometimes it was upwards of literally 250 matches a year. I mean, it was an unbelievable schedule. And I'll just give you an example real quick. And I always tell people, if they say, "Well, how did you have that kind of schedule?" This was our typical schedule. Monday night Nitro was live, and we were in a different city every night of the year, 52 weeks a year. And no off season. And we were in the midst of the Monday night ratings war with WWE. So everything was at a heightened, degree there as far as just the intensity of how hard we were going. Because it would be like, your main rival every week, going up against your main rival every single week. It'd be like the Bears versus Packers every week.
Yeah, intense, right.
So there was Monday Nitro. And then typically we would sometimes have Tuesday off, but you'd be on the road off. And then we'd Tuesday or Wednesday, we would tape the Saturday night TV show, which air on WTBS. And whatever day, usually the other one was we had off, but you were on the road, so you still weren't sleeping in your own bed at home. And then Thursday, we had Thursday Thunder, which was live, which was on the CW network. And then we had 2 teams that we sometimes were called A and B team or red and blue team, but there were we did house shows, which were not filmed, but those were Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you can imagine that, all of a sudden you get the Sunday and the week's over, and all of a sudden Monday Nitro, you're starting over on Monday night.
Wow.
And one Sunday a month we had a pay-per-view, and a pay-per-view was kind of like, it was kind of like a Super Bowl every month. I mean, you were expected to really turn it up a notch. And so you can imagine, there weren't a lot of days off. And And it was the one thing I always say about, I always tell anybody that wants to get into professional wrestling is, you can want to get into it for the fame and the fortune. And I don't fault anybody who wants to get rich and famous out of whatever they do. But I always say, you can't want that first, because you really have to be passionate about this, because it is really going to challenge your dedication. And I say that about anything that you really want to do to make a living doing, like especially a performance, career, like a singer, an actor, whatever. You're going to be put in a position where you're going to be, constantly challenged, constantly. Right. You have to go out and you got to, if you're a performer, you got to do that. You got to one up that performance the next night. So, for me, I can say, like, if you love it, that helps. And I always say that, out of all those times on the road and sleeping in a different hotel every night, I don't ever remember once putting my feet on the ground and saying, "Oh, I got to get up and go do this again."
Right.
I really loved it. And I still do, which is why I'm trying to pass along what I was so fortunate to learn.
Yeah, that's so cool, Ray. I love, and that's right. It is, it's performance, but it's so many different. That's what fascinates me about wrestling, is there's so many different aspects to it that you have to be good at. You have to kind of be a good generalist, right? At many different things. You have to be
That's a good point. Yes,
shape. Yeah. But I mean, I just like when you describe that, the surprising thing to me is not that professional wrestlers are ever hurt or injured, but that they're ever okay. Right? That's how they're ever able to do their job. That's the surprising thing. I see we already have a comment here where somebody says that professional wrestlers are more jacked up than UFC fighters on average. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly sounds believable to me.
Yeah, and that's that's why I'm very thankful to see that the industry is changing somewhat, to where they're not expected to put up with that brutal schedule that used to be in the 90s and into the early 2000s, which is why there became at some point a big problem with a lot of the pro wrestlers having issues with taking pain medication, and we lost a lot of really good friends who
some real tragic stories
who became addicted and couldn't get past it. But so it was we always say in wrestling, it's not if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt. You perform constantly hurt, but then if you're injured, of course that's a different story. So I mean, if you get injured where you can't go, then obviously, they give you time off. But, back then, even though that I'd come into the era of we started the guaranteed contracts, still, you were constantly in a position where you didn't want to, lose your spot, so to speak. And so then, just being a competitive athlete, you want to be able to go, you want to, as I always say, you want to be able to earn your keep. And, and I was always like everybody else. It's like, you just kind of, you limp in some nights, and but when you get out there, it's funny when you get out in front of
the crowd's people, there, right?
How all that stuff can go away for a few moments.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. Both then and now, what were you doing in terms of physical training outside of the ring, right? Because you look like you're still in really good shape, right? And so, like you're like,
most of my hair is thin a little bit, but I got most of it.
And that clearly isn't the case with many. I mean, many had wrestlers, as have been seriously injured in like a crippling way long term. Yeah. So, what did you do anything different, physical training in terms of exercise or prehab or rehab to kind of keep your body together through all this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I was very fortunate to to get educated at an early age because, like I said, my dad was always my brother, and he was always our coach. My dad was just always into fitness. He was a Georgia State trooper, and both my mom was also in law enforcement. And, my dad was just always into athletics. He always played softball, so, it was easy for my brother and I to kind of want to be, just like most kids, you want to, be like your dad, or be like your mom, so, we were in that environment, which really helped kind of set some good habits for us in the beginning. But I attribute a lot, and I realize now, the older I get, I have a great saying. I always say, "What I've learned." I look back and look at things like, "Gosh, man, what I really learned." Going through all this is my two martial arts instructors who, like I said, I started studying with about 14, 15 years old. And I discovered that I was already had a naturally good level of flexibility. And so through martial arts, and I continued to study that. And I still do to some degree. I don't think I'll ever really walk away from that. I'm still close to my two instructors who one of them just celebrated his 80th birthday. And I still would not dare try to, get on his bad side. but,
Right.
but no, I just, and I was always very health conscious. I mean, I got both my degrees in health education.
That's cool.
When I graduated college, I started teaching school while I was chasing the wrestling dream, and I was coaching, and so usually I taught health education. And eventually I got my master's, and so I was always very health conscious. But I will say, it always comes back to my flexibility. A big part of everything was keeping my flexibility. And of course, I'm sure, your listeners, when you had Dallas on, and today, I mean, I'm one of the biggest proponents of DDP yoga because, as Dallas always says, flexibility is youth. And I've tried very hard to keep my flexibility. And I've gone through a lot of injuries. I mean, I'm just now in April, I had my second hip replacement. I've had 4 knee surgeries, ankle reconstruction, shoulder surgery. Like I said, now I have 2 artificial hips. But that's just because of the wear and tear of what I put my body through. And I don't have any regrets there. I kind of knew what I was signing up for, but because of constantly doing things like DDP yoga, trying to eat as healthy as I can, which gets harder and harder as I get older. but yeah, I mean, that DDP yoga has been a great thing for me. And I always say to every young wrestler, because, when we're young, we think we're going to live forever, and
Sure.
and we think that, we'll always feel like we feel when we're 25 years old. But I always say, to them is that, that to really concentrate on working on DDP yoga if they're in this industry, because it was developed I always say it was developed for us by one of us, which is
Right.
Dallas. And so if anybody should be doing the DDP yoga, it's anybody who's doing what like professional wrestlers do, because they do. But anybody, if you haven't, if it's something you haven't looked in or checked into, I really encourage everybody to go check out DDP yoga, ddpyoga.com. Anybody, any age, any physical ability or disability, he's got a program for literally everybody. And he really does walk the walk. He really does.
And we talked about that a good amount when he was on the show before. So I'll make sure people are referenced back to that. So it really seems like the flexibility and the mobility work is what's
really
doing
helping me a lot.
Really that's really cool.
And even today, like, I mean, I'm amazed at how much flexibility I still have been able to keep. And it does. I mean, because I see when we get together every 3 months over in Tampa. There's what they call like a pro wrestlers legends lunch. And and I by no means consider myself to be a wrestling legend, but I'm fortunate enough, because of the hard work that I've done, that I always say that my greatest accomplishment is being accepted by the legendary figures in wrestling that I looked up to, and to be able to be offered a seat at that table is a huge honor that I don't take lightly. So when I get the chance to get together with those guys, and every time we get together, it almost seems like someone has been lost since the last meeting, because a lot of those guys are older now, and I see just how broken down a lot of them are, and I feel for them, because I know that if I don't stay ahead of this, that could very easily be me, and so I've got a lot of motivation to still try to keep my flexibility, and just try to keep taking care of myself as good as I can, and as I slip into closer to retirement age, like I said, it gets harder and harder, but I've got some good people around me, and that helps.
So, Ray, let me ask you this now, since we mentioned that there's these different streaming services, and Peacock is one, and people can go back and just relive all the awesome days of wrestling past. What matches are you most proud of now that people could go back and watch? You would say, if you could watch just 2 of my matches, what would you send people to?
It's funny. I usually try to show these 2 matches to our 12-week camp, because it's if I get a chance to. And the 2 matches that are 2 that to me are really close to my heart are Bash at the Beach 1997, which was a pay-per-view, which you can, all those are on Peacock.
That's right.
And the reason why that was so special is because I was tagging with my tag partner, Ernest Miller, and we were going up against Mortis and Wrath, which are our mortal enemies at the time. And that
was a fun feud. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I became great friends with those guys. And I say that to say, not giving anything away from wrestling, because I'm very big on still protecting the magic of wrestling. But when I say I became friends with those guys, it was because of the respect that we earned for each other. And I always say, good friends, better enemies, in the ring, because same thing. Some of my good friends that to this day are guys I play football against. And when we were on the field against each other, man, I was going for their head as much as they were going for mine. But when we were off the field, they were still my good buddies. And they still are to this day. But that match was one where I got to think that most people in professional wrestling, they have that one match that you just go, man, that match was one where everything really clicked. And the audience seemed to really, really love it. And that to me was that match, and for a lot of reasons. But and it was a big success for us because Ernest Miller, who was legitimate, professional athlete, professional football player, legitimate 3-time world karate champion, and still competes to this day on the Masters divisions, and he looks great. I mean, I always tell him he looks like he stepped right out of a time capsule. I mean, he doesn't seem to age at all. But that match, he had only been, he kind of got recruited into pro wrestling by Eric Bischoff because he was the martial arts instructor to Eric's kids, and Eric was the president of our company. And so within about a year, he became very proficient at something that takes most people a lot longer to really, really get a grasp of. And so that's another reason why I was really proud of that match, is because how well he did with all the pressure he had on him. My other match is Slamboree 97, which I think was earlier that year, and I had actually fractured my left ankle 4 days before the pay-per-view.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, 4 days, and wasn't supposed to wrestle. I had a cast on my ankle, and the magic of the pro wrestling world, we were able to kind of work some things out to where I actually wore Dallas boots are 2 sizes bigger than mine, and I had to have bigger boots to fit over the cast. And we actually Ernest was not supposed to debut until a couple of months later, and we were able to manage to put together this match where he ended up debuting and coming out of the audience and kind of helping save me from the the ongoing beating that I was taking. We really became known as one of the really greatest unannounced debuts of a wrestler in wrestling, especially during that time. So those and I show it to our trainees to say, hey, look, in anything, you got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to shift gears sometimes, and and lean into what your cards you're dealt. And we were at that time. I mean, I was faced with an injury, and all of a sudden here I am. I believe it was the second pay-per-view of my run with WCW. And here I am. I've worked almost 10 years to get here. I wasn't about to sit out unless they absolutely need me. And so it was just I always like to say it was a good gut check for me to see, how much I really, really wanted that. And to say, okay, well, and to show my boss, hey, look, I'm willing to still push forward but get creative and kind of find a way to where the audience wasn't necessarily aware of what we were having to work with, but and still give them, I always say, more than their money's worth. So those two stand out.
That's great, and that brings me to a couple of other sort of questions that I really don't know the answer to, but I'm curious to learn. One is, and maybe this varies from wrestler to wrestler and match to match, but how much of the match is sort of mapped out in advance versus how much is sort of improvised, right? And what do you guys, and what's the procedure when something goes wrong? Because things clearly go wrong. Like people would probably get like legitimately hurt. And I guess you're trained to keep face and stay in character no matter what. Give us a bit of detail.
And I'll try to answer that as best I can but still preserving the magic of wrestling, because
totally.
Here's what we teach here at the Nightmare Factory is because when you're on TV, and especially live TV, there's a lot of pressure on you, and everything is timed down to the second, really. So everything you're watching, like for example, last night AEW had AEW Dynamite, which comes on Wednesday nights, but it's from 8 to 10 p.m. and on TNT, and it's live. So everything that's happening is there's a template for the 2-hour show, and you try your very best to stay on that template, which can be very challenging at the time when you're doing live TV. But
I remember Nitro sometimes didn't get it all in, and I would be so upset as a kid because the match wasn't finished and they'd have to cut it.
right. And then of course on Monday Night Raw, I mean, and SmackDown, I think they tape SmackDown now, but Monday Night Raw is still still done live, but what we always teach is we teach our trainees to basically to learn how to improvise and think on their feet. In other words, as we like to say, call it in the ring, because by doing that, what that does, in our opinion, is two main things. It allows you, the performer, the wrestler, to slow down. So you're not going too fast to where the audience can't absorb what they just saw you do. And two, it allows you to really live in the moment as a performer, so that if I'm in the ring and I'm living in the moment, then the fans will be living in the moment too. I don't want to ever make it look like that I'm trying to get through this just to get to something else.
Yeah,
And because if you do, then you lose. Our goal is to connect emotionally with the audience, and and that's what has always plagued wrestling a lot over the last 30 years. It was really kind of even started when I was coming through in the mid 90s. Is a lot of wrestlers they become guilty of, they want to get all their stuff in and they want to do all these great moves, but and that's all well and good as long as it can make sense to the audience. If it doesn't make sense to the audience, especially nowadays when these are our greatest competitors right here, so for attention, and if what you're doing in front of the audience is not engaging the audience, then the attention spans are they're pretty short these days. So they will turn to their cell phone or start talking to their friend next to them. So so it's of course in wrestling, it's you can go out there and certainly you can some of it you could plan and put stuff together ahead of time, but I always feel like the best performances are the most genuine performances. And to me, the best way to have a genuine performance is to have it in your head, a general idea of what you want to do when you're out there. And then you go out there and you play off the energy of the crowd, because every single crowd is different. I don't care if you go back to the same arena the next night, the crowd is going to be somewhat different just based on the people that are there. So you really, you have to learn how to read what the audience is giving you and connect with the audience. And I feel the best way to do that is to kind of call it as you go, so to speak.
Right. So how that is the ability to improvise like that, of course, is a great skill, because I mean, to improvise on anything requires a lot of mastery. To improvise on the guitar or a musical instrument means like you've got it down in order to improvise.
Incredibly challenging.
And I'm just trying to highlight this. I mean, some people when they first see wrestling, they're not familiar with it. Like you said, they might be critical, but when you understand what's going on, there's a lot of technical skill here, a ton of technical skill, and I admire it. I'm fascinated. I would never want to do it. I love it. I appreciate it, just because I'm not those bumps are just I've been a martial artist for many years, Taekwondo, and now I'm training jiu-jitsu. And martial arts takes its toll, as you know, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine anything being more brutal than professional wrestling. I can't imagine what would be more brutal than that, right? But I'm just highlighting the technical skill there is really impressive, because it's not just improvising by yourself on an instrument, right? But you're improvising with somebody else. So it's like you're jamming with a band, which means you kind of got to know the other person too and what they're going to do. So how do you do that when you're wrestling? Do you ever wrestle somebody you've never wrestled with before, and you just got to do the best you can, right?
And but here's I kind of compare it to this. I've been fortunate enough over the years to get to know a lot of people in the entertainment industry, several really, really good musicians. And if you watch a really talented musician who really is a genuine artist, whether he or she plays the guitar or whatever, a good example is someone who's good with guitar. Someone who's good with the guitar can really sit down and jam with anybody else, even though they never met them. They just sit down and they feel the energy and off of what that person can kind of jump right in. Good pro wrestlers, in my opinion, are a lot like that. Is that if you really know what you're doing and you're really well versed at what you're doing, it's almost like I always say wrestling is like a competitive dance. And if you get two people who really know what they're doing and they somehow they have great chemistry together, you can see we'll create that illusion of a violent contest, and it's still, even though I say we create the illusion of a contest, it can still be very violent, very physical. It still can be. Our goal is to go out there and like I said, do this, put on this, this performance, and like I said, create this illusion of a true contest. And if we do it right, if we do our job right, then the audience allows themselves to suspend disbelief, as we always say, and get caught up in the moment if we do it right, and it's but a lot of times, which is what we teach, here at the school, is that a lot of times, it's not necessarily all about just the wrestling moves, because people are coming to be entertained. So, you have to be an equally good and effective performer and marry those two exceptionally well. And if you're doing it in live TV, you also have to be aware of all the cameras and and the time restrictions and all those things on top of being able to go out there and be a performer and maybe communicate what you're doing, and just hide all that too is like any good performer, any good. I always say we're like physical illusionists,
Right.
great
Yeah, that's a good way of
magicians.
putting it.
Yeah, great magicians, you're not seeing people defy the laws of physics, but you allow yourself to get caught in the great performance if the person's doing good magic. We always say
Yeah.
bad magic is bad magic. It doesn't matter who's doing it. Yeah.
Right.
But good magic, when you see good magic, you allow yourself to believe it. And when you can sit there and say, well, we've all been there when you see somebody do something really, really amazing and you go, how'd you do that? That's the same thing. A great wrestling match, when it's done correctly in front of the audience should be like, wow, how'd they do that?
Right. Yes, I've had that impression many times, actually. Now that's so cool because music is. I've been a guitar player in my life, so that's something I understand. And this is a helpful analogy because you're right. A good guitarist should be able to jam with anybody, but at the same time, right? There are certain musicians that they'll have a special chemistry with too, and I imagine it's the same in wrestling, right? Especially if you play with them for a long time, like. Eddie Van Halen had a special chemistry with his brother, right? That he just didn't have. He could play with anybody, but it was special when he was with Alex Van Halen. Who were some of the guys that you just really that you love to wrestle with? I mean, I can think of obviously stuff with Canyon and those other guys, but for you, who did you feel like it just clicked really well with?
Canyon was without a doubt the one person who I just felt like I had the best chemistry in of my whole career. And I say that meaning that, don't take that wrong. We beat the fool out of each other in the ring a lot of times, but we respected each other's ability, and we just we were able to challenge each other and we had tons of matches together. But one of the guys who is still a great friend of mine to this day, and this is going to sound pretty ironic to people because to know how powerful he is. But Bill Goldberg, I wrestled Bill several times, and we always had great matches. I remember Dallas and I were sitting down years after WCW. We were watching some stuff, and he was like, "Man," he's like, "Man, you had kind of lengthy matches with Bill, like back when he wasn't really having those kind of matches with people." And I was like, "Yeah, and a lot of it was because Bill was a martial artist, and he was wanting to start trying different things, and I could feed off a lot of what he was trying to do in the ring. I don't know. I worked well with him, and so we had really good matches. And,
now, one thing about Goldberg is wrestling always looks like it hurts, but it always looked like it hurt a little bit extra when Goldberg was in the ring. Is that true?
Oh, trust me. Yeah, it is. But here's what everybody's heard. If you follow professional wrestling, you've heard there's been the ongoing kind of stories that between him and Bret Hart and stuff like that. And I get all that. I mean, but Bill was Bill was always extremely powerful and strong, but I never Bill never seriously hurt me at all. I mean, yeah, like I said, well, I never was injured when I wrestled with Bill. I mean, things hurt because when Bill Goldberg spears you, and for the non-wrestling fans who may be listening, basically he was just a running tackle, and he was a former, all-world college player and a pro football player. And when he tackled you, I always said the only good thing about getting speared by Bill Goldberg was that there was only an 18 square foot ring. Thank God he couldn't get more steps going before he hit me.
Good point.
People would always say, like, back then, because being worked with him several times, I would get to that point where people would say, what's it feel like to get speared by Goldberg? And I've had the same answer for 20 plus years. It's like, I don't recommend it.
What was the worst one? Was there any move from any wrestler like this one I just really, really don't look forward to?
You know what? The one that comes to mind is funny because he's a great friend of mine, and I literally consider him like family. Is King Haku. When he was in WCW with us, he wrestled as Ming, and his tag team with Barbarian, and they were just, just two of the biggest, toughest guys you would ever want to step foot in the ring against. And one time, I remember, and this is something that hurt me. I didn't get injured, but it hurt me, and I was on the offensive. But that just tells you how big and strong and powerful a person Ming was, and still is to this day. But we're having a man, and he's in the middle of the ring, and I run off. He throws me off the rope. I run. I duck his clothesline, and then I keep running. I run off the ropes. I duck his back elbow. So you got to think I'm building all this momentum coming, ping ponging off the ropes, and he's standing in the middle. I come and I run and I close on him as hard as I can, and he didn't even budge. And I really remember thinking, like, I felt like my arm got ripped off my body, and I was on the offensive.
Right.
So but yeah, that was but yeah, being with those guys, obviously with Bill was always, like I said, it was always a very physical match, but you knew that going in, and that's what wrestling is. But I wrestled Dallas one time on Thunder. Dallas and we had a great match, but Dallas was a very physical wrestler. I mean, with Dallas, Dallas was gonna go. Dallas was gonna get in there, and he was gonna get the fifth gear pretty quick. And if you couldn't keep up, you were gonna pay the price. But yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of who else over the years. I've had. I had a really good feud with Chris Adams, who was big in world-class wrestling back during the day before the big cable show started, and he was a European wrestler, and learned a lot from him. But he's the guy who initially trained Stone Cold Steve Austin, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of tough matches, but I kind of felt like I'm partly made out of silly putty. I just seem to kind of bounce back and things kind of form back into the original shape after not too long.
That's impressive. Yeah. Good quality to have. I know you're between training sessions here, so I could obviously ask you these questions all night, but you are doing another really cool project right now. So I want to switch gears just a little bit to this, and we'll have to bug you to come back on the podcast again another time. But I want to make sure we cover this. You're working on a film. You gave me I got a sneak peek at a website. It looks awesome. Let's talk about this a little bit. How did this project come about? What is it about? And let's dive in from there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving me a little time to talk about it. And maybe in the next few months, when we get closer to releasing it or setting the date to launch it, I'd love to come back on and maybe talk more specifically.
Absolutely.
About it. But it's called it's a film called it's action adventure film. It's a action adventure sci-fi film. If you can imagine the Magnificent Seven meets. They Live, which is a movie starring Roddy Piper film back in the 80s.
Cult classic.
And it's a cult classic, yes. And the name of our movie is called The Unbreakable Bunch. And my co-producing partner, creator of this, Luther Biggs, who wrestled with me at WCW, went to the power plant. We came up with this idea probably 10 years ago to make a movie that had an ensemble cast of legendary pro wrestlers. It had never been done before. And we knew Hollywood would never really tell the story the right way, and that's no knock on Hollywood. It's just we figured if the story's going to be told, let's tell it for the people who lived it, and put a nice little fun spin on it, And so what we came up with is a really good movie that shows that really paints pro wrestling and pro wrestling fans in a really positive light. And there really hasn't been a movie that's really, really done that. And we felt like it was just, it's long overdue. And so we decided to make a movie that has a ton of legendary wrestlers in it, a lot of great cameos, a lot of really good actors in it as well. And we wanted to make a really good family-friendly film because a lot of our audience, we know our audience, which is pro wrestling fans. There's a lot of young pro wrestling fans, and we wanted to make a movie where the whole family could sit down and enjoy a movie together. And the funny thing is like when our editor first did his pass on the first edit of the film, I remember him calling me up and he goes, "Wow, Ray, so this feels like a good old Saturday night beer and pizza movie." And I was like, "Well, good. That's kind of what we're going
perfect. For. I've got 4 kids, so this is going to be perfect.
So maybe root beer and pizza." So,
right, yeah.
But it's a legendary. It's like I said, we got the legendary pro wrestlers together. Just to give you a quick rundown, and if you want to learn more about the movie, and we'll be upgrading our website here pretty soon. But you can just go to unbreakablebunch.com. It's just unbreakablebunch.com. And the way we came up with the name, I give my buddy Luther a lot of credit for because he really came up with it. We were fans of the ensemble movies of like the 60s and 70s, like the Wild Bunch, the Magnificent Seven, the Dirty Dozen, movies like that. Of course, the modern day version of that is the Expendables. But we wanted to make a movie, and you think the Expendables, Sylvester Stallone was a smart guy. He got all these action heroes together, kind of some of them more aging action heroes, and said, "Hey, let's make a movie together." So that's what we did. We said, let's get some wrestlers together who, maybe have had great careers, but are still willing to get out there and mix it up and let's make a great movie. And so, well, the story is a pretty fun story. It's this group of aging pro wrestlers, come together for this final wrestling tour to kind of help a friend of theirs in need. We all end up working for this promoter we all swore we never worked for again, and which makes for a lot of great entertainment in the movie. And the promoter in the role in the movie is played by a great actor named Adam Manarovich. And if there's any Walking Dead fans out there, you'll remember Adam from season 1. He played Carol's abusive husband in season 1, and Carol's character has lasted all 12 seasons, I believe. So most people can relate to that character, but he plays a totally different role in this very funny, very animated character. But yeah, it's there's just to give you an idea of all the wrestling stars who are in it. If you're an old school wrestling fan, I think you'll really love this movie. There's myself, there's my buddy Luther, the living legend Larry Zbyszko, my former tag partner Ernest Cat Miller, Diamond Spade, a great role in it. Gangrel, former WWE superstar, the legendary Stan the Lariat Hansen is also in it. We actually have a great cameo from Pinklin Thomas, former world heavyweight boxing champion, is in the movie, and our buddy Big Ron Reese, who was in the Ravens flock back in our day in WCW, who's 7'3" monster, and just the list kind of goes on and on and on. So, and there's some great cameos in there, and it's a movie we're really proud of because it's a really fun story. You get the obvious things that you think you would have. You get to see a lot of great wrestling, a lot of great action, but there's also some really tender moments in the movie. Of course, like I said, the one who sits at the top of the heap in the movie is King Haku, King Tonga Ming is really, in my opinion, the star of the movie in a lot of ways, just because he has such a great energy, and when you're on the screen, everybody sees him and knows him as this legendary, really tough guy, and of course he is that guy. But in our movie, we get to show a really kind, tender side to him that I don't think audiences would probably expect to see. And there's also some other moments in the movie that really make the movie a very special story with a lot of different layers that I don't think people are going to really expect. So it's a fun ride, and it's one that the whole family can enjoy.
Well,
we're really looking forward to putting it out.
I really appreciate that. I mean, we're always looking for just family movie night options. So it sounds like it's going to be the perfect one. I also love what you said. I just want to highlight this a little bit more about the positive aspect of it, because I mean, the first movie that pops to mind is The Wrestler, and that's a good movie, but it's a dark movie. And like clearly there's some very sad, tragic stories in wrestling, but there's also stories like yours, like people who say, look, it's tough, I got my bumps, but I don't have regrets. I love the fans. There's a lot of goodness here. And I think it's cool that you're gonna be highlighting that side of it as well, that aspect of it as well, right?
And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted, and I always tell people, when I try to describe the movie in a nutshell, I say what this movie is about is the beauty of camaraderie. And when you get any group of like-minded people chasing I always say in the same lane, chasing the same type of dream, there's some great things that come out of that, especially great friendships. And our movie really does, demonstrate that because some of the best friendships I've had in my entire life have come from the wrestling business, and it's because I met people who were chasing a dream just like I was, and they were chasing the same type of dream. And so we really highlight that in the movie, and the way we kind of do that, to where we're able to really highlight that, is the group, when we get together, we actually there's an RV in the movie that actually kind of is a character all in itself. It's a classic RV that we have, and so the characters travel in this RV, and so it really puts us in the environment where you get to see the bonding that takes place among the characters, and that's already there to start with, but how it continues to grow as we move through the movie. And there's a really, really famous scene in the original Magnificent Seven, which, of course, anybody who's followed the Magnificent Seven, there was a remake just a few years ago with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt, and Mark Ashworth, who's in that movie, who plays the preacher in that movie. He has a great role in our film, and plays kind of the town crazy guy who really knows what's going on, but everybody thinks he's crazy and no one listens. But also, if you research the history of the Magnificent Seven, there was a movie called The Seven Samurai before that. So what we really try to do too is kind of make the wrestlers' version of the Seven Samurai. But and what we did was, by bringing everybody together, there's a really famous scene in the original Magnificent Seven where all the gunfighters are talking about the life of a gunfighter, and the young gunfighter is basically saying how that life must be. And we have a young wrestler in our movie who kind of plays that role of the young wrestler who's on the up and is on the rise and has a great career coming ahead of him. He's already in the beginnings of that. And there's a great scene where we're sitting, taking a break, and the RV is parked, and we're all talking, and we call it the wrestler's arithmetic, and we start talking about just all yes, we all love the fact that we should pursue this dream, but it came at a price. And there's, you have the being away from your family, the injuries, just the loneliness of being on the road. All these things are very real things, and we address those. But but at the end of the day, what really comes out of that most is the fact that you meet some great friends along the way that you're able to go through all that with, and we try very, very hard to portray that kind of atmosphere in this movie. And like I said, it's a really good, fun action film, but it takes a lot of twists and turns that I don't think anybody's really going to expect. But at the end of the day, it's a movie about a bunch of great friends standing arm in arm and kind of tackling whatever comes at them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm really looking forward to this. Remind us one more time of the website where people can stay updated with this. Yep.
Yeah, it's really simple. It's unbreakablebunch.com. And
excellent.
And that's it's a term that's kind of that we created for the movie. And in the movie, it's explained that if you're and this is kind of a fictional term, but if you're a wrestler who can endure that schedule and year after year and kind of push through all the injuries and everything, you tend to eventually earn the title of Unbreakable. What it really evolves into our movie is that it evolves into the unbreakable bond of friendship, and so that's cool. That's one of the things that we really worked hard to make sure the movie was not just an action adventure shoot 'em up type movie with no story. There's a really, really like we said, good, meaningful story with a lot of good layers and a lot of good stories kind of wrapped into the big picture, and I think people are really going to enjoy it.
That's awesome. I cannot wait for it. This hour has flown by, Ray, but maybe do you think we could squeeze in one or two questions from the audience before we say goodbye here?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. So here's one from Robert. He wants to know, this is kind of a technical question. This is interesting. He wants to know, how much is catch wrestling still taught in the modern American pro wrestling environment? Is it true that pro wrestling sort of evolved out of catch wrestling? Isn't that the history of it?
Yeah, it did. And really, pro wrestling really started in the carnivals, back in the 1800s. And they were true contests, in the beginning, a lot of catch wrestling. But what happened was, unless, and anybody even today that's a fan of amateur wrestling, you have to really be kind of educated in what you're watching, to really kind of keep up with what's going on. And to the untrained eye, someone who's watching two really good wrestlers, there may not be a lot of going on that what they see. But to the to the trained eye, of course, they can really appreciate it. So what out of the fact that in the carnivals, they started to see that people kind of got bored fast with if they didn't know what they were watching, so they ended up putting the performance aspects into it with the wrestling moves to keep people's attention, and that's how it kind of started. And so, but I would say today, probably more than ever, we're seeing a lot more of that kind of come back into wrestling with guys like Daniel Bryan and certain other wrestlers who really are just great technicians in the ring. And so I think we're seeing it more now than maybe even when I was coming up, which I think is a really good thing, because it does, in my opinion, it makes it look a lot more authentic and it makes it look a lot more realistic. And when you get put in a certain hold that is a legitimate hold, you become a believer real quick.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's a related question from Carson. He says he's interested in hearing about the crossover aspects of pro wrestling training and collegiate wrestling training. So I'll kind of add to that. Is it necessary that somebody sort of has a background in some form of wrestling before they try their hand at pro wrestling, Ray? And what would you say to this comment?
Yeah, it certainly helps, of course, it certainly helps. But I'm a perfect example. I mean, my high school didn't even have wrestling when I came up. I'm ashamed to say. I'm proud to say that they do now. And but no, here's the thing. This is the challenge when we get someone who has had a good amateur career, who's been a good amateur wrestler, just even just a solid high school, even if you wrestle in high school, when you learn as a wrestler, in amateur wrestling and freestyle wrestling, that you learn to react, grabs you. And in professional wrestling, you have to create the illusion that that you're working against each other, when a lot of times, what you're really doing is working with each other. And that takes a lot. And if you're an amateur wrestler and you kind of been programmed to react when someone grabs you, we kind of have to go back and almost deprogram you a little bit, so that
Sure.
you're not automatically grabbing someone and throwing them, without, which, could maybe get somebody hurt. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like anything else. If you have any wrestling training, having a good knowledge of wrestling holds certainly helps if you're going to go into pro wrestling training. But it's not completely mandatory that you have an amateur wrestling background to get in and become a proficient professional wrestler, because the holds are once you learn kind of the basic whole series of holds, which can be, I always say if you're a decent athlete, you can get pretty well trained in a matter of about, in my opinion, 3 to 6 months. If you're a really good athlete, you can pick it up, and that's training 5 6 days a week. That's not training once or twice a week, or you have to really be putting the time in. But once you learn those basic holds, then it really becomes equally important to learn how to be a great performer and take all that stuff and put it in a performance aspect, so that once again that you can entertain an audience and hold their attention.
Yeah, excellent. Really good answer. All right, let's squeeze in one more here. And Benjamin wants to know, which wrestlers from WWE and AEW stand out most to you? And do you think AEW will be a significant long-term competitor for the WWE?
Wow, I'll kind of answer the second part first. Yes, I do believe that AEW will be around for a long time, and I certainly hope that's the case. But I really do believe they will. I mean, Tony Khan is someone who seems to be very, very serious about building his company, and in the first 2 years, I'll tell you what, his track record is looking pretty good so far. So, and here's my thing: being a professional wrestler, what I think every other professional wrestler wants, which is as much opportunity for pro wrestlers to perform as possible. And having AEW, just like when WCW was going head to head with WWE, I'm a firm believer in that competition is good. That's why there's always a Home Depot next to a Lowe's.
Agreed.
There's almost always a Burger King next to a McDonald's. And so competition is good, and the more opportunity, the better for the pro wrestling fan and the pro wrestler. But just the performers who were significant for me were when I was coming up was Dusty Rhodes. When I was coming up, my two childhood heroes were Evel Knievel and Dusty Rhodes, and I was fortunate enough to get to meet Evel Knievel one time and had an awesome evening talking to him. And then I got to know Dusty very well and very personally, and he became my mentor, and something that I'd still sometimes pinch myself. And a memory came up on my Facebook page last night of he and I in the ring together. And I still look at it sometimes, and there's a part of me that wonders, did that really happen? But
that's cool.
But yeah, so watching, I can go back and watch people like Dusty, of course, Ric Flair, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, these people who, I remember Dusty saying one time that one of the things he was really proud of was that no one had to preface his name with the words "the pro wrestler." He was someone who transcended pro wrestling, just like Andre the Giant, and like I said, like Hulk Hogan back in the day. Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin's on the Tide commercial now. So if you've never watched wrestling before, you still maybe are seeing this character for the first time. That guy, he's entertaining. So so those are the ones that I really admire in the pro wrestling business, are the ones who could certainly go out there. They were tough people, tough guys, but they could go out, they could get the job done, but they could also just entertain the daylights out of the audience, and that's really what our goal is what I Lou Thez, who's a legendary pro wrestler, who was kind of known as the Babe Ruth of our industry. I was so fortunate to know him the last 10 years of his life, and he was just one of the classiest people I'd ever gotten a chance to meet. He really taught me what it meant to be a professional and how to carry myself. But he always had a great sayings that go out, and one he was always saying, make your goal be the one that they're talking about on the ride home. Be the one that sticks in the audience's mind. And one way you do that is, I always feel, is give the audience more than their money's worth. You don't give them just their money. Make them feel like, man, I would have paid twice as much to see what I saw tonight. That's our goal, is to really, really let the fan know that hey, we appreciate you, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you as a fan. So that's
well, awesome, Ray. I mean, you've more than given us our money's worth here. This has been an absolute treat and delight for me. I really appreciate you sort answering my nerdy questions. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to mention aside from the movie? Any other sort of projects that you're working on that you want to put a plug in for? And where can people keep up with you online? Because I know you're on at least a couple social media profiles as well.
Yeah, and I'm on Twitter at I am Glacier on Twitter, and I've got to kind of get reactivated on Twitter because I haven't been putting that much out there. But and I'm on Facebook. It's just Glacier Ray Lloyd is my fan page, or just you can follow me at just my personal page, which is Ray Lloyd. And I'm on Instagram. I'm trying very much to get more and more involved in that social media. But like I said, I'm the older generation, so I'm trying to learn as I go. But yeah, and that's. Mostly I'm mostly on Facebook, and Cody laughs at that all the time when I tell him, but I'm mostly on Facebook. So, here's the one thing I would say, other than the movie, the unbreakablebunch.com, and like I said, we'll be updating the website. Robert McLaren, who is Diamond Dallas Page's IT guy, will be doing our website. Who's a great friend of mine, and he manages all the Diamond Dallas Page's stuff, and so I know he can be trusted, but also. I do have some really news coming out in 2022, and I'd love to come back and I can't really talk about it just yet, but outside the movie, but I will say it's very much Glacier related. So if you're a Glacier fan and a pro wrestling fan, I think you'll be interested to know what I got to be able to reveal. I just can't reveal it just yet. But that being said, anybody that's listening that is a pro wrestling fan, this is something I always try to say whenever I'm fortunate enough to be a guest on any show, is that if you ever watch wrestling when I happen to be a part of it, I thank wrestling fans for being as dedicated as they are, because I feel like they're the most dedicated fans in the world. But I hope that I did everything I could to entertain you. Like I said, give you more, and I'm so thankful that we have such dedicated pro wrestling fans, because you are a vital part of what makes this whole thing run for us in the industry. And with you not doing your part of investing your time and money to come see us and me, and specifically, I don't. This kid from South Georgia doesn't get to live my dream. So I'm so eternally grateful to all the wrestling fans, and the fact that we have, I think, the greatest dedicated fans in the world. So thank all of you for being fans.
Awesome. The passion, the enthusiasm, the connection with the fans, it's also admirable. Ray, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and I look forward to doing it again with you at some point.
Oh, same here.